I have two rules for this channel, and the first one is to always be honest with people, even when this has the potential to cost me relationships with manufacturers, because I can always just buy those manufacturers' printers when the channel gets big enough, but I can't get subscribers back if I start making stuff up. And the other rule is to never try and sell things to people. I find it's my job here to be nothing more than informative and tell you the practical pros and cons of a particular product so you can make up your own mind. But every so often we'll end up with a product that is just so much of an innovation that I can't help but be more excited about it than anything I've tested before. And that's exactly what the Uniformation GKtwo is. It is an incredible innovation in the 3D printers space that all of the other manufacturers need to catch up to very quick. So if you're new here, then hi, I'm Ross, and this is FauxHammer Videos. So for a bit of background, I recently published a video comparing all of the 10-inch 28.5 micron printers. That's the Saturn II and Saturn 8K, the M3 Premium and the Mighty 8K. And I had more than the odd comment saying, try the Uniformation GKtwo, which it's not exactly the same profile as those printers, but it's close enough to be comparable. And little did people know, I'd actually started testing the GKtwo the day that video was published. And it took little more than the unboxing and setup for me to understand this printer's potential, but no more than my initial exposure tests and one print to ensure that that potential is fully realised, and I put this printer as the #1 pick for best 3D printer for miniatures up on FauxHammer.com immediately. Now of course I will go on to print quality, but spoiler alert, it's easily on par with any of those other printers and even the 22 micron prints from the Sonic Mini 8K, but depending on your environment, this has the potential to be better. But let's start with what it is. The screen on this is marginally larger than similar printers at 10.3 inches, and that 0.3 equates to a few more millimeters in print area. But arguably area is more important than height because then you can fit more on a build plate. It's only a little bit larger, but it's larger. The screen resolution though is still 8K, which is 7680 by 4320. But because that 8K resolution is on a larger screen than the others, they are slightly larger pixels, so this is 29 microns rather than 28.5 that we've seen on those comparable printers. But honestly, you would be hard pressed to find a difference between a 35 micron print and a 22 micron print, something which I'm actually going to prove in my next video. So for anyone saying they can see a difference between the prints on this and something like the other printers that I'm comparing them to, then you must have cybernetic eyes or you're making it up. You can't tell. There's no way you can tell. Like, it's half a micron. That's 1/140th of a human hair thickness. And I know, and I'm sorry for driving this point home like I'm beating a dead horse, but this is for those people out there throwing these numbers out as if it somehow proves one printer's better than the other. So for anybody out there spouting that 29 microns is so much worse than 28.5, please just shut up. You're not helping anyone. I'll go into more detail proving these points, but for now just take it as gospel that it's comparable to the same quality, but this has the potential to do those high quality prints faster. Speaking of quality, the whole printer absolutely oozes quality. From the UI and the build, everything here is metal for a start, which is again a good sign of a solid printer, but just the power button has a very contemporary utilitarian feel and look to it that just screams, this is a modern product. I know I'm gushing a bit and I'm sorry, but it's just ace. Onto the features, and I'm just going to try and rapid fire these. Number one, the lid is an up and over lid rather than a whole lid that you lift off and have to find somewhere to put. I normally don't like these, but because it's the whole front and the sides that lift up, it means that I've still got access to everything inside the unit. It comes with easily replaceable carbon filters, and other brands have done these, but these are cheap because they are just blocks that magnetize onto the back of the unit. It's not too expensive to get a ton of replacements, and unlike other brands, they actually sell the replacements that you can go and buy right now. The printer comes with all your usual gubbins like Allen keys, a USB drive, clippers. It also comes with filters for your resin, but this comes with a funnel and a rubber scraper rather than the plastic scrapers that you get from other brands. You also get some rubber gloves and a scraper to get the prints off the build plate. All in all, it's a little bit above and beyond what you usually get with these printers. Nothing to write home about, but it's nice to have the extras. Now, leveling on this thing is a bit weird and new, but the good thing is you don't need to level it. It should come pre-leveled from the factory. Because of this new mechanism, there shouldn't be anything for you to do. But if there is, then there's a video included on the USB drive that you can go and watch, and it'll show you how this original ZArm mechanism actually works and how you can correct it. And the actual build plate is smooth, which people might look at and think that's a downside, but honestly I've had more trouble with the laser engraved build plates because trying to get prints off them can be an absolute nightmare. If you've got your temperature and exposure settings right, then a smooth build plate is no problem, and thanks to this printer's built-in heater, you can get your exposure settings dialed in and your temperature right with absolute ease. You do get plenty of paperwork with the unit explaining how to use the slicer, how to level the bed, and also how to go through the out-of-box experience. But this was a little bit wrong because it actually told me to slide the vat out, which I couldn't do because the ZArm was in the way. So you kind of have to ignore the paperwork a little bit, turn the printer on, raise the ZArm, then you can slide the vat out. And that's right, I said slide it out. You see, unlike other printers where you normally have the vat and then a couple of screws that you have to tighten down in order to get the vat in place and ready for printing, with this they've got rid of that because that's quite fiddly, especially when you've got your hands covered in resin and you need to loosen something. You get resin all over those bolts and it drips down onto the thread and then it ends up locking up the printer. With this, you just put it in place and slide it in. This is kind of an obvious way to do it when you think about it, but nobody else thought about it, so well done Uniformation for innovating. This is one of the most convenient features of this printer that nobody else has. And I was concerned that this mechanism might cause some of the resin to slosh and splash out, but nope, it's not tight enough that that happens, so yeah, this works and it's great. Like with any new printer, make sure you do your exposure test and your tank clean before you start printing with it, just to make sure that there are no defects on the display. With the exposure test though, I would prefer a little more than a circle and square in the middle of the screen. I'd rather something that takes up the full display because this only tests a small section of it. The vat cleaning will light up the whole display, but it won't show me if there are any artifacts or defects or dead pixels in other areas of the screen. To be fair though, with the pixels being this small, even if there were a few dead ones, I don't think I'd see them anyway. And as I mentioned before, leveling's a little bit weird, and I didn't fully level the bed because it was fine when I got it from the factory, and if something's not broke, don't fix it. But unlike the one paper, two papers, this wanted a sheet of paper, and then you put little strips in each corner to make sure they were tight. In my case, they all were, so I just assumed it'd work and got on with my printing. But again, if you follow the video on the USB guide, it'll explain how all this works, how to level the bed, and make sure you've got it tight and ready, just in case yours arrived a little bit off kilter. And I'm so happy to say that the USB drive is right there on the front. There is one on the back too, but this was actually for a Wi-Fi module that wasn't fully developed, so they didn't just stick it in the box and hope for the best, like some other manufacturers have done. They've left the USB port there, and if the Wi-Fi dongle gets completed, they'll release that later on. They're not charging you for something that's only half developed. And the UI is really nice too. It's been fully localized, but more than that, it's intuitive, and it is on the upper echelons of the more attractive UIs that give a better user experience and announce more quality in the efforts rather than those that are just functional displays. But the thing I love about this printer is the fact that whenever you go to print something, the first thing it'll do is copy the file from the USB drive to the local storage. So even though you don't get the best quality USB drive with this, like you do with every printer, in case that has issues mid-print, it's not going to stop you print, because your print is stored on the internal memory. You do need to remember to delete this and clear this out every so often, otherwise it won't copy and print new files, but other than that, this is a godsend of a feature. So to remain comparable to the other large 8K printers I recently reviewed, I once again used Frozen's 8K Aqua Grey resin. And without doing anything special, I just poured the resin in and selected the leveling test file that was pre-sliced on the USB drive. The 2-tier vat takes 700 milliliters of resin. That's not the biggest, but it's far from the smallest, and the wide aperture around the outside stops any resin spills or splashes going into the mechanism. Just beware that when any resin falls into this recess, that's when you know you've filled it to the brim. Don't keep filling beyond there, otherwise you're likely to get it to overflow. And after 45 minutes, this print was complete, and I'm not entirely sure what it's testing here. It says leveling test, but other than adherence, I'm not really sure what I was meant to check on these prints in order to make sure it was level, but they all came out and looked sound. Maybe I'm missing something, but I prefer to print something a lot shallower and saving a lot of those 45 minutes. But printing these gave me direct insight into the next innovation of this printer. This build plate actually has a lip all the way around the edge, so where usually you'd have a few resin spills coming off, dripping on your desk, your floor, on your hands, this catches them. And I don't know if this was an intentional addition, but absolutely genius, guys, because this saves so much mess. But the biggest benefit of this printer that nobody else has done yet, and if you want this you need to do something aftermarket or DIY, is build a heater into the printer. In all the videos where I've shown my exposure settings, I've always stressed that my printing environment is roughly 20 to 22 degrees, recently anyway, when I've managed to get it to that temperature. Because environment temperature, or more specifically resin temperature, is the most important yet underrated aspect of resin 3D printing. If your temperature's too cold, then it'll lead to longer exposure times in order to cure, and even when it does cure, it'll generally be more brittle than when it's cured at a higher temperature. And if you've followed the channel for a while, then you probably saw my mini 8K review where I said I didn't like the frozen 8K resin because it's too brittle for miniatures, and then I followed that up by testing their coloured 8K resins, and again I said they're great but they're too brittle for miniatures. I love this stuff now because, like the other people who were initially arguing with me, telling me that it's great, they were printing in different parts of the world with higher temperatures, so they got the best of that resin. Now I can too. I absolutely love this stuff. Don't get me wrong, because it's high detail, it's still noticeably more brittle than other resins. Because of the temperatures I'm printing at now due to the inbuilt heater, it means that I get the best of this resin, and it is noticeably more flexible directly off the plate. So if you're somebody who is printing in their garage or shed in an environment like the UK where it's typically cold, this will do all it can to get your resin up to the temperature it needs to be to get the most out of your resin. In my case, where I'm already at temperature, it actually improved the exposure times significantly. Again, I'll refer you back to my comparison video where I printed this exposure test on all the printers at 1.5 seconds per 30 micron layer in order to get the best exposures, and they were all pretty much the same. When I took that 1.5 second exposure time and 30 micron layers to this printer, I was overexposing my prints. And again, I want to stress this in every video till I make a dedicated one, but the way I determine perfect exposure is by comparing holes and posts. So if I've got more posts, that's overexposed. More holes, it's underexposed. I gradually stepped down my exposure time doing this test print, which took no time at all, about 15 minutes. And then I found that every time I printed it above 1 second, it was still overexposed. My best exposure time for this printer, no joke, was 0.75 seconds. That's literally half what I was printing at on the other printers. And I kept those settings for literally everything I printed in this review. So the way this heater works, it's not a vat heater, it's a chamber heater, and the chamber it heats is the chamber below the resin vat, so the chamber containing the LED array and the LCD. You can tell the UI what you want to set this to, but I set it to 35 degrees Celsius and just left it there the whole time. And when I checked the surface temperature of the resin itself, it got up to around 30 degrees, which is more than adequate. If they make it too hot in the chamber, then that can actually cook those components, leading to a shorter lifespan on both. Now realistically, I'll probably up my exposure times a touch because I've shown you what perfect exposure is, and I've said a few times, and I will make a future video explaining why perfect exposure is not the best exposure, especially for miniatures. You want to overexpose just a little bit to ensure those supports have a good hold. But But if I did need to replace the LCD, this is yet another innovation of this printer, because it's just a case of 4 screws and a ribbon cable. That's it. There's no half disassembling a machine like I've done with other printers, just 4 screws, ribbon cable, new LCD in, and you're ready to go. Brilliant! Speaking of the screen, you also get a screen protector pre-installed and you get a spare one in the box just in case of any resin spills. And this is more than just a sheet of clear film, it's actually a full overlay that goes over the LCD and beyond it to protect anything getting into the internals. And then finally, there's the little latch on top of the ZArm. Normally you have a giant screw or bolt that you need to tighten. No more. All you need to do is put this in place, which you can do one-handed, and then pull the latch down and it's ready to print again. You can hardly even miss that latch because when it's finished printing, the whole bed rises to the top, and when you try and close the lid, it actually presses down on that latch and you can't close it properly, thus indicating you haven't secured this. And I can't be the only person here who's tried to do a print without a secured build plate. So in summary, this is the printer to get right now. It's got print quality that rivals even the Sonic Mini 8K, and no, I can't tell a difference, and I very much doubt you can too. And it's got so many usability features like the build plate leveling, the lip round the build plate, the latch when you connect it to the ZArm, the fact that the tray slides in, the fact that it's clear how much resin to put in, the fact that it's got a screen protector, it's easily replaceable, the screen's easily replaceable. It's got a carbon filter that's so easy to change. But most importantly, it's got a built-in heater, which means if you're in an environment where it's naturally cold, then you'll be able to print all year long. And if you've already got a good printing environment, then it means you should be able to reduce your exposure time significantly, and it means your models will be printed that bit faster. It also means you can get more prints off your LCD before it eventually dies. Oh, and I even forgot to mention that when you buy this, you get a load of high quality models from top model creators linked on the USB drive. So you don't even need to go and buy things to print awesome stuff, you get them with it. And I don't know why more brands do this. Surely there are model creators out there with awesome sculpts that are happy to give away free models just for the advertising alone. Now, with all these features, it is at a higher price point, but it's not prohibitive. It's not, oh my god, this is $2,000. It's actually quite reasonable and comparable to some of the other printers. Just make sure when you go on the website, you select just the printer itself to see its actual price, because the page will default to the bundle, which includes the wash and the cure station. But with all these features and the inclusion of a heater, right now, in my opinion, this is the best 3D printer in the consumer market that you can get. And until the other brands can catch up with these features, it'll be the benchmark that all those future printers are going to get compared to. But look, I don't want to be accused of mis-selling something to the wrong people, so hey, if your budget can't extend to this, then that's totally fine. You've got to pick the right printer for you. But if you can stretch to this, what I'm saying is, what you get is worth more than what you're paying. So out of nowhere, Uniformation have just appeared to compete with all the big dogs in the 3D printer scene, and you know what? Crushed it. I want to say thanks to our patrons and thank you for watching. If you want early access to content like this, then make sure you signed up to our Patreon channel, because they get the content at least a week earlier than everybody else. And it's great that you just watched this video and heard my ramblings, and if this did help you or educate you or inform you in any way, just let me know by doing no more than hitting that like button. It's the little thumbs up icon, it's just down below. But don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we've got more great content coming soon, like Anycubic's new entry-level printer and Elegoo's first entry into DLP printing. And I will be doing some beginner guides, ideally aimed at people printing with their first printer, specifically aimed around miniatures. I'll do the whole process for you, but in order to do that, I need to clear the decks, and people just keep sending me printers. It's a chore, but I'll do my best. Thank you very much for watching once again, and I'll see you guys next time. Fohammer out.